Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Dion, and today we are doing a video all about horror movie tropes. Now, through the month of October and even a little bit September, I've been talking about a bunch of spooky movies, spooky books, spooky TV shows, all to give you guys like costume inspiration for specific characters and stuff. And full disclosure, my horror movie education is pretty small. I was a baby about horror until like 2 years ago. I'm still kind of a baby, and that's why most of my references are like 80s and 90s horror movies, just because I find them a little bit less scary than horror movies that are coming out today. Through my new horror movie education that I've been giving myself over the past few years during Halloween, there are obviously horror movie tropes, and I want to talk about them because horror movie tropes are a lot like fashion aesthetics. There's a theme, a lot of times based on stereotypes. There's a certain way you dress, you act, you speak, etc. So if you like all things spooky, please make sure to subscribe to my channel because I post videos every Thursday. And with that, let us get into the video. Like I said, I wanted to do the video on like horror movie tropes. These were actually photo shoot ideas that I was going to do. Never got around to it, but here we are. They're essentially just themes that you see in a bunch of different horror movies. And when I say trope, I mean they're very consistent. You see them again and again and again throughout scary movies, and they're quite common, if not a staple in the scary movie industry. Because when you're watching a horror movie, right, you're on the edge of your seat. Or even if it's a bad scary movie with just a bunch of jump scares, you're still clenched waiting for the jump scare to happen. Because of that like clenching, like, oh my god, what's gonna happen, what's gonna happen, what's gonna happen, you welcome the familiarity of a horror movie trope because you know what's gonna happen. Oh, she just had sex, they're gonna die soon. It's sort of like this comfort in a horror movie that you have because you see something familiar, so you sort of know what's gonna happen. And I like horror movie tropes because it also gives directors and writers a chance to flip the horror movie trope. So if the person of color always dies first, they have the person of color be the final girl or whatever. So it also gives you a chance to turn things on its head. But I like the familiarity of a horror movie trope in general, sort of knowing maybe not what's going to happen, but at least like kind of feeling like you know that character. Before we get into all these horror movie tropes, I'm acknowledging when I say I like these tropes, I do like the familiarity of it, but I'm very aware that these are very misogynistic, they're very colorist, and they're not great. But I think with these certain things, the best you can do is make fun of it, right? And hope for better. And so I don't want you to think I'm like endorsing these like pigeonhole one-dimensional characters in horror movies, because that's certainly not the case. Horror is actually one of the only genres where women tend to speak more than men. But I think what they missed out on that study is typically it's like the speaking is a 10-minute long scene that does nothing to do with the plot, or like a 10-minute long brutalization of that woman where they're just screaming help. Like that's not necessarily like a multi-dimensional character, and I feel like often horror movies are a vehicle to show women being tortured and brutalized. So the first one, and a personal favorite of mine in different scary movies, is the Victorian ghost trope. A fun fact, I went to summer camp at one of the oldest summer camps in the United States, and there's a bunch of different ghost stories from there. And one of them is the little girl in white, who like haunts a certain cabin at the camp. She wears an all-white dress, and one of my friends claims, and I believe her honestly, that she saw her one night, that like she woke up and she went to go to the bathroom and she saw the girl that haunts the castle or whatever. And you see this in the movie The Cursed, Haunting of Bly Manor, Sleepy Hollow, The Others, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Again, it's the long white nightgown, usually half up, half down with a ribbon in their hair. Oftentimes a little girl who died maybe of scarlet fever or cholera, or maybe they were murdered. Sometimes it's like an old maid, like it's a woman in their 20s. So of course that was considered an old maid back then, who was scorned because she never got married or something. But it's the proper, they're not necessarily evil, but they're sad, and they walk around and haunt. This would be a good Halloween costume in terms of like long white gowns and like dark makeup and very forlorn and ghostly. Like being a Victorian ghost, I think would be, or a Victorian child would be a very funny Halloween costume. But I do like this trope. Typically the soul gets released at the end of the movie, or sometimes the ghost is truly evil and they continue to haunt throughout the whole day. If you're wondering, like, wait, did she button her top wrong? This top is supposed to be asymmetrical, so just FYI. Another horror movie trope that I love is the scorned woman. These are women who the entire point of their character in the movie is to seek revenge. Someone did them wrong and they're seeking revenge. I'm thinking Carrie. I'm thinking Fatal Attraction. I'm thinking Foxy Brown. I'm thinking Kill Bill. I'm thinking Pamela Voorhees from Friday the 13th. It is all about avenging someone, avenging yourself, and these women tend to be beautiful, but they're not the femme fatale, which we'll get to later. They're pretty, but they're like kind of girl next door almost, that they're sort of an in-between of the final girl trope and the femme fatale, where they're pretty but not sexy. Someone did them wrong and they have a generally good heart, but something makes them snap, and that's what starts the whole film of them trying to seek revenge. They're not necessarily evil or bad, but they're so revenge driven that sometimes that takes them to be evil or bad, like Friday the 13th. Or even Carrie. But a lot of times these women have genuine reasons why they are scorned and why they're doing the evil things they're doing, like in Carrie or in Kill Bill or even Foxy Brown. I mean, all these women had genuine grounds to be angry and to be scorned. I think any of these like Carrie is a very popular Halloween costume, Kill Bill with the yellow jumpsuit. The next horror movie trope, the third one, and it is one of my personal favorites, is the bimbo. The slut always dies. If you're not a virgin in a horror movie, you are going to die. That's a fact.
Certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie. For instance, number 1, you can never have sex. Big no-no!
We see this with Tatum in Scream. She's definitely more promiscuous than Sydney, and she ends up, and it's kind of, you don't see Tatum have sex, but you see how she is hyper feminine. I mean, in the scene that she dies, her nips are like fully out, and she is definitely more sexually advanced in terms of the way that she speaks and acts around her boyfriend compared to Sydney, who is more like, would you settle for a PG-13 relationship? You see this with Cheryl in Evil Dead. Her and her partner are more sexually promiscuous than Bruce Campbell's character and his girlfriend, and Cheryl ends up dying. She is a little bit more crass, a little bit more graphic, a little bit more promiscuous than the other female, who lasts much, much longer in the cabin, and therefore Cheryl deserves to die first for being a promiscuous woman. We see this with Lydia in Halloween, as opposed to Jamie Lee Curtis's character, Laurie, who is a virgin and much more clean cut. Lydia, she is sleeping at her boyfriend's house, and of course she subsequently dies. Marcy from Friday the 13th, and one of the most famous examples is Marion from Psycho. My mom took a film class and she actually mentioned this when I was talking to her about this video that I didn't catch when I watched Psycho, but that was many, many years ago. Marion, that character in Psycho, she's first seen in like, you see her like with a white bra or something, or like a white undergarment. You see her in black undergarments, a black bra, and she ends up dying. Fred Hitchcock did that purposefully, saying like, switching over to the dark side, she's being a slut, therefore she deserves to die. Alrighty, so the fourth horror movie trope, which I think this is everybody's favorite, the man-eater. Jennifer Check from Jennifer's Body, the movie Teeth, Morticia Addams, I would even put that in there, Tiffany, Bride of Chucky, Akasha, Queen of the Damned. Like, these are the femme fatales who don't give a fuck about the men that they're destroying. And I put Morticia Addams in there because you think how whipped Gomez is, right? Morticia is a bad bitch. She's scary. And I mean, Gomez just worships at the feet of Morticia. I mean, they have relationship goals, but Morticia can hold her own, and she has Gomez eating out of the palm of her hand. Same with Tiffany, Bride of Chucky. She's like, she's not buying Chucky's bullshit. She's not, she's rolling with him. Tiffany is a badass character on her own. I never saw the movie Teeth, but from what I could get, it's literally the man-eater trope. There's Jennifer Check, we're not killing people, we're killing boys. It's all, boys are just placeholders. They come and they go. All about just a disregard for the man's life. They don't care, and they're self-serving, and as long as the men are serving them, they're happy. And I love this trope because it's one of the only tropes that we see in movies where the roles are a little bit reversed. All right, and the final, but probably my favorite trope, just because it's ridiculous, is the final girl. I actually read the first half of the Final Girl support group. I did not really care for the book, but I'm really interested in the trope of the final girl. And everybody knows what I'm talking about. They're the girl next door. They're not hot. They're not ugly. They're pretty, but not in an outward sense. They don't dress hyper feminine. They dress a little bit tomboyish, a little bit girl next door, a little bit conservative. We're talking Sidney Prescott. We're talking Laurie Strode. We're talking Nancy Thompson. We're talking Tree Geldman. We're talking Ellen Ripley. These women, it's very male gaze. So they're pretty, but they don't know it. They're not too slutty, but they're still sexual. And of course, they're virgins. Well, I guess not in the sense of Tree from Happy Death Day, which great movie, but it's badass about them. Again, they're a little bit tomboy, and with Ellen Ripley in Alien, she's changing gender roles, and it's just about the reason why they survive is because they're not hyper feminine, they're not seeking revenge, they're not a victim. They know how to fight. Laurie, Sydney, Nancy, Tree, Ellen, these bitches know how to fight, and they're willing to do it, but they're not aggressive. They're not too much. That's the trope of the final girl. In order for a woman to be good in the male gaze, they can't be too much. They can't be too sexy. They can't be too smart. They can't be too dumb. They can't be too ugly. They can't be too tomboy, but they also can't be too hyper feminine. They can't, be a victim, but they also can't be too aggressive. The final girl is the perfect balance of independent, but also still dependent. And it's interesting for me. Sidney Prescott and Laurie Strode are probably the two most famous final girls. Sidney Prescott from Scream is obviously my personal favorite because I'm in love with Neve Campbell. Everybody knows this. It is interesting to see how this trope continues on. Even with Tree, which is a relatively newer movie, Happy Death Day, she is, she's in a sorority, but she's not one of those sorority preppy girls. But she's also not one of those alt girls. She curses, she has a little bit of an edge to her, but her mom also died. Typically, the final girl has a parent that died. She's pretty, but again, she's not sorority girl, hyper feminine. I could do a whole video about the demonization of hyper feminine women in movies. Let me know what you guys think of horror movie tropes and what your favorite movie trope is. I love the bimbo. I think it's horrible that we always kill the sluts off, but I always appreciate the bimbo in horror movies because they always turn out the costumes, and that is always a welcome in horror movies. If you don't already, follow me on TikTok and Instagram because I post on there almost every single day, and subscribe to my channel because I post videos every Thursday. Last week I said there was only gonna be one more October video left. I lied, there was 2 more. This one, and then next week will be the final October video. It'll be November. So if you like spooky things, subscribe, stick around, and with that, have a happy day.